So, Jeff, hey, I'm so glad you were able to come on. I know it was relatively short notice, but you're part of a group that I joined, and quite honestly, we really don't know each other at all.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear. I'm excited to learn about you. I've had a chance to tell you a little bit about me and my purpose and what the Cheat Codes is doing, but I would love to hear. Where'd you come from? What made you what you are, and where do you want to go?
Awesome. So just diving into kind of my life story, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, Prince George's County, Chevrolet, adopted to Boise, Idaho when I was 3 weeks old. My parents had 4 kids, and then he adopted me and my younger brother. We're twins, and what I mean by that is he's from Atlanta, I'm from Maryland. We're born 3 hours apart. So I've grown up like having a twin and everything. I've moved to Africa 3 times in my life. When I was 7 and 8, moved back to Idaho, 14, 15, 16, was in South Africa, moved back, and then I served an LDS mission in Ghana, West Africa. And so I've spent a lot of time in Idaho, Africa, and now Utah since 2014. The interesting part about my life, or my story, I guess I would say, is growing up black in Idaho was an experience on its own. You know, there's not a lot of kids that look like you. There were certain experiences. My high school, I was one of the first black kids to attend the school, one of the only black kids in the school. That came with, 1 year I had people in the KKK rope show up to the school. 1 year I had pictures of me hanging from a tree in my textbooks that was drawn and everything. Now, the reverse of that is moving over to Africa. I moved to a country where everyone looks like me. But the difference was I didn't fit in with that culture. I couldn't speak the languages. I was more accustomed to the whites in Africa and what they were doing. But because of the way I looked, you're typically supposed to fit in with that same group.
Right.
But I couldn't understand the food or the customs or anything. So I may have been in a place where everyone looked like me, but then it was the same thing of not fitting in.
So that must have been hard from an identity perspective, right?
It was. And shifting that to, I went to Utah Valley University here in Utah. And one of the things, and actually in this men's group, it's one of the things that I've learned is for so many years, because of the way I was raised and where I was raised, I lived with this mask. So the life that I tried to live was the life that I thought society needed me to be, the person the way I needed to act, carry myself, everything. And then the past year, I finally got to the point where I'm like, why? If people aren't going to like me, that's on them. If people aren't going to connect with me, that's on them. And I got to the point where I'm like, this is Jeff. You're going to love me or hate me, but this is who I am, what I stand for, and what I believe in.
Don't you find that, because I can relate exactly to what you're saying, and the reason for that is I grew up in the FLDS, and we wore the like pilgrim clothes, and my sisters wore those things, and when we would go out in public, it was, you're different.
Yeah.
Right? You're different.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I don't belong. But then also we weren't really accepted in the FLDS because of some stuff that my dad did when he was younger. And so it's like, you're not even a part of a group.
Exactly.
Like you're trying to be a part of a group, but you're not. But then when you try to put on that mask and be what those other people want you to be, it also doesn't deliver for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, who are you pleasing?
Exactly. And also I believe that instead of putting your happiness first, you're trying to appease people and make everyone around you happy. And when you conform like that, your internal self, you're not happy. Mm-hmm. And you get frustrated. You don't understand. You're like, I'm doing everything that I think society needs me to be, but it's not working. And so I think it's an interesting thing. And both of us living here in Utah, you also deal with the whole Utah culture. Mm-hmm. And being LDS and living in Utah County, I mean, I tell people, I leave my house every day and I know I'll get offensive looks, gestures, whatever it may be, solely just because of the way that I look. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everybody does that, right. But I'm like, I wake up and I deal with it and it's become, I'm used to it now. And it used to bug me, but I'm just like, that's that person's opinion. It doesn't affect me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change how I'm going to live my life, but it's taken a lot of work and growth to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wild. So talk to me a little bit about you said about a year ago you decided, well, that's a long time to go, going down that path of really not being yourself. I'm curious, what were the things that led up to that? Like, when did you come to the point in your mind where you're like, I need to make a change? What happened?
You know, I was realizing, so if I struggle severely with anger issues, and I think the other thing would be self-confidence. And so about a year ago, I said, you know what? It's time for me to invest and work on myself. And so I started working with a human behavior specialist. I started working with a spiritual coach. I hired a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and then I found a men's coaching group and joined all of those. And to me, it became my dream team. And I had all these different places on myself that I could work on myself, but also challenge my perspective and the way I was thinking. And so it's been rough because it's not hard to admit that you have faults or shortcomings and to look and self-analyze yourself and realize, okay, maybe there's some things I need to change, or maybe the way I'm looking at stuff is not the way it actually is. One of the biggest things I realized about my anger was I had expectations of others and those around me which weren't the right expectations. I'll give you an example. I value showing up to things on time. When I would have friends that would show up, even if we're going to work out and they'd be 20 minutes late, I would be frustrated. But in my head, I had to realize that that might not be a value for them. Showing up on time is something they don't value. Just showing up at all is what they value. And so I had to realize that these are things that I value, and I can control what I can control. Outside of that, I can't. And so I can't let that frustrate me or make me angry. And so it's been little things like that that have kind of been like light switches that have flipped on.
That's interesting. You know, I think this is something that I've found very clearly is there's no way you can change until you see that there's something, acknowledging that you have anger, right? Just that alone. There's no other path to becoming better if you don't recognize what you own.
Yeah.
Right. So saying that you own that anger is such a huge leap. It is such a massive leap, because I'm curious to know, how long do you think you went in your life where you didn't own it?
You know, it's crazy. I actually, and this last men's coaching group event that we went on, I addressed it. When I was 14, my dad took me to a wilderness therapy camp called Red Cliff Ascent, which dealt with anger management and issues. And talking to my dad about it, he said a few years after, it helped you to manage it and everything, but I never had gotten to the root of the anger and what was happening. And so analyzing, here's the things that trigger me, and being able to understand, okay, here's the situations where I get triggered, not to put myself in those situations, but also surround myself with the right people. Because one of the things that I realized is you meet so many different people in this world. Some people are just not good for you, and they're not going to help you be the best person possible. And so I wanted people that were willing to call me into integrity and be like, Jeff, you know you don't want to get angry. You know these are the goals that you set. You're not doing it. But also those same people can celebrate when I win. They can celebrate when I accomplish something. And so it's been a shift of, what is my friend group? Hey, you're a great person, and I am grateful for the experience we've had, but this is not working right now for me. Nothing against you, but I just know there's things that you do that trigger me. And so removing people from my life, which is never an easy thing to do, but it's the best thing possible when you remove a negative and you add a positive to it.
You said something, and I want to dig into it a little bit. You said identifying the root of the anger. So where do you think you're at on that journey?
I'm still on that journey. It's tough. I'm starting to realize certain places and things that here's the root cause. So how do I change that? Like, for instance, I'm a competitive son of a gun. So anything, pick up basketball, a turkey bowl for football, I know I'm going to get frustrated and angry at some point. And so I started to be like, hey, before I play basketball, I'm going to meditate. Before I do something active, I'm going to meditate and just get in a calmer state. And then I know, hey, if I do that, I'm already calm. And number two, if I change my expectations for the group on, this is just for fun. There's no championship. At the end of the day, it's just a game. Understanding that has helped me a ton. But it's really, you know, one of the things that's been hard is one of the therapists I work with, he said to me, anger is a positive. I've always viewed it as a negative. And he's like, it's 80% positive, 20% negative. And for all of my life, I've focused on the negative part. But when you get angry, it's telling you something about yourself. That, hey, something is causing this, something is triggering you, which allows you to not only you're expressing emotion, but now that's how you get to the root cause. And so that's also been a shift. And instead of beating myself up, I'm like, okay, this gives me now a time to talk about, here's what frustrated me, here's why it frustrated me, and really speak open about it. You know, one of the things about our society is men are taught that we can't show emotion. We don't want to be vulnerable, and we never want to ask for help. And so getting to a place where you can speak openly about, hey, this is frustrating me, or this is how I'm feeling. That's a huge thing. This is the emotions that I'm feeling within this circumstance or this situation. Getting to a point where I could express that and talk about that with my close circle has helped me really start to get to the root of all the different causes.
That's interesting. You know, in my studies and journey of my own, I had similar issues, but see, my default coping mechanism was alcohol. And for so many years, I was like, "What's wrong? Why do I keep going to this?" Right? Yeah. And after doing a bunch of research and understanding what happens is when we're children and we experience some traumatic event, it could be big or small. It doesn't have to be this like wild thing. What happens is your subconscious will box off an emotion that you feel because you know for fact you don't like the way it makes you feel. Yeah. Shame, right? Let's say you feel shame as a child. It will box it off and it will compartmentalize it in your subconscious. When you grow older, I have this illustration that I show to people that I help with, and it's this guy sitting in this box, and he's walled off, and all of his emotions are on the outside of the box, and he's on the inside with a bottle. And that's how I felt. It's like I couldn't reach those emotions because they were blocked from me. And so I go to that default emotion that I have, right? Whereas what I've learned, and I love that you said this, is the purpose of life is not to be happy. The purpose of life is to accept all emotions. Yeah. And I love that you said anger is an indicator. It's a check engine light of something that you're feeling, and it's a useful thing. I love that. That is such a great message, right? Because so often we try to run away from those, right? Like we get away from those emotions and I don't want to feel that. And there's something wrong with me if I am feeling that. Yeah. It's like, no, your body's so intelligent. It's telling you there's something, hey, look at this over here. That's so awesome.
And being willing to accept that, hey, it is telling me something. So now what do we do? What is the solution? I think it's crucial to understand that we're given this mixture of emotions for a reason. And so many times we want to run away from them or hide them or sweep them under the rug. And I'm like, guys, your body, your mind, your soul is telling you something, that it needs help. It needs something. Embrace it. Yeah. And go all out to solve it.
Yeah. My belief is that the reason that we run away from our emotions is because, one, we've witnessed, as we were growing, as we were young, we've witnessed the people who are raising us do the same thing. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's their fault, because if you look at it, they're actually in the same position we are, as in no one taught them how to deal with emotions, how to properly deal with emotions. And so the world in general is on this path of TikTok and let me put something in front of you so you can ignore whatever you're feeling. Yeah. Let's delay it. Let's sweep it under the rug. So that's like that default. And I always challenge people. I always say, like, I estimate there's a high percentage of the population that cannot sit in a room and look at the wall for an hour because they will feel so uncomfortable with themselves. They need something to be in front. And that's that indicator of saying, like, there's a lot of stuff that's inside that's not being dealt with. Yeah. And it's coming out in some way, maybe not directly related to that trauma, but anger, alcoholism, Netflix, right?
People turn to pornography and, all sorts of things because it's a crutch for the problem. And I'm like, find the solution. I'm curious, if you don't mind me asking you a question, is people that are dealing with whether it's anger or pornography or alcoholism, how do they get to that point where they either the switch flips and they realize, hey, I need to ask for help? But how do they do that? Because I feel like there's a lot of times, and I was the same way before I started working with people, is you don't want to address it, you don't want to touch it, but you're also scared of judgment if you do reach out and ask for help.
Yeah. So in my book, I talk about this. There's two things. There's rock bottom moments, which are really unfortunate, and nobody wants to get there, truthfully.
Yeah.
And I would also say rock bottoms are different depending on the person. But for me, standing in my front lawn with a gun to my head, let's not get there, right? Let's not get there. That's how stubborn I was in not wanting to ask for help. So I think, unfortunately, sometimes some people do have to hit some sort of rock bottom. But the only reason I say that is because we have to move to this place of accountability. And if we don't think that our behavior is wrong, I can't come to you and tell you your behavior is wrong.
Yeah.
One thing I used that I rationally think about this for a second. This is so ridiculous. I struggle with alcoholism. I did, right? And my brothers did as well. And in my mind, while I was in the depths of struggling with it, I compared myself to them and I said, well, I haven't been arrested for a DUI.
Yeah.
I haven't gone to jail. So I'm not as bad as them. Even though I am so deep in addiction, I'm sitting there playing this comparison game and saying like, well, I'm not as bad as those guys, so I'm still good.
Yeah.
And so that can be the same thing related to anyone else. We're all looking at other people and saying like, well, how bad is and you know, before we started, you were talking about the group. And what I think is interesting is if we shift our audience of who we're with, that comparison is still there.
Yeah.
And so if we're looking at it and if we're the smartest, brightest one in the room, then we're always going to compare to those people who are struggling worse than we are and think that we're okay. Yeah. If we shift our audience, all of a sudden we're like, whoa, I'm the one that has a lot of work to do. But it's that, how do I look in the mirror and take that accountability? And unfortunately for some, they're so deep in whatever it is that they're struggling with, they are blind and deaf to this.
Yeah.
They're blind and deaf to it. They don't think it's them. It doesn't apply. It's not important. And that's why I was curious for you, like, what was that moment where you're like, I got to make a change? Because I think we all go through that process where we're like, you know, blind to the way that we're behaving.
Well, and I realized, I think for me, it was understanding that a lot of the people I'm around, I know that I'm physically stronger than. And so I got to a point where I'm like, if I get angry, I could end up hurting someone, which leads to me ending up in jail and who knows what happens. And so it got to the point where it's like, okay, I need to solve this and find a way that people can be around me and feel comfortable. One of the worst experiences I ever had was a kid who wasn't comfortable around me because he felt physically threatened. And that's never a place I want to be or put someone into that situation. You know, one of the things we did at my last coaching groups event is we had a ceremony where we were able to get critiques from the guys in the group. And one of the ones that I was given by multiple guys was they viewed me as not approachable, which was hard to hear because I work in the field of public relations. My job is to network and connect and talk with people. But diving deeper into it, it was because, you know, if I'm at a place, they see me and I'm like this, stuck on the phone the whole time. If I'm sitting over in the corner or I'm doing a meeting.
Do you think you're stuck on the phone because you're also insecure about like?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's my crutch because in my mind, I'm like, I can just work and I can control that. When I'm in a room, it's interesting. If I'm in a room and it's for work, I can talk to everybody and network and everything. Now you put me in a separate room that has nothing to do with work, it's a whole different ballgame for me.
Yeah.
Because partly I'm insecure about myself. Secondly, you're scared to open up to people and to show your true side.
Do you think it's because you're worried you'll get rejected?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's a mixture of rejection and acceptance.
It's funny you say this because I get the exact same feedback. I'm unapproachable. I look like a jerk. I look, I'm on my phone. I'm standing in the corner.
Yeah.
I'm not like the bubbly, dude. But I know for me. So I'll tell you a little story. This is interesting. For years, I'm in sales, by the way.
Okay.
And I've been in tech sales for 20 years. So just to your point, that's my job too.
Yeah.
To like go and be shaking people's hands.
Uh-huh.
I had an epiphany a couple of years ago. I went to like this event where it was kind of like a growth mindset event, and there was a ton of people in this huge house, and they were all like, talking with each other. And I was looking at myself and I'm like, man, I'm just standing over here in the corner and I feel so uncomfortable. And someone who was with me asked me, they're like, why do you think you do? And then I started thinking about it and I was like, man, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. A lot of times, especially, I don't know if it's just a Utah thing or what, but a lot of times when someone meets you, they're like, oh, hey, how are you doing? What high school did you go to?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. First, for me, I went to the polygamous school. Warren Jeffs was my principal, and I only went to the 9th grade.
Yeah.
For my whole life, I'm 42, but for my whole life, I've had two options. I could lie and tell them I went to some school, or I could tell them the truth.
Yeah.
If I lie, they can catch me in the lie by asking if I know so-and-so.
Uh-huh.
If I tell the truth, then they're like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Did your dad have multiple wives?
And it leads to a whole
I just
list
met this person and they're in my trauma.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't like to meet people.
No, that makes 100%. It's interesting that you say that because you're right, because I'm thinking in my mind is if I met you and that's what you said, there's a million questions that you want to fire off. And I think understanding in the space that I've been in to understand my coaching group, there's 50 dudes and everyone is battling something. Mm-hmm. And so I've learned that everyone has demons. And so you have to tread lightly on the questions that they ask and things that they may bring up because you don't know what bag of worms you're opening up. I was playing basketball the other morning with a bunch of my buddies and one of the guys left early. And so a little bit later I said, hey, were you injured? Everything okay? And he opened up and about some personal stuff and some traumas and everything. And to the group's mind, oh, he got mad playing a game, so he left, not realizing like this is an anniversary of a loss that he had and all these other things that he's going through. And so it causes me to step back and be like, this is just a bunch of people looking for an outlet, something to distract them, get some exercise in, get their mind going. But everyone is battling something.
Yeah. I think, what's so interesting is, you talked about the group and doing that exercise where you're kind of like giving each other feedback. I can tell you that it's so interesting the things that you've said about yourself because I've just now met you today. We all make snap judgments of someone the moment we see them.
Yeah.
And I never thought to myself when I saw you that you're insecure or that you're a lot of the things that you've said, I didn't think any of that. In fact, I thought you were super confident and there's nothing to be insecure about. You're a big muscly guy, right? Like all these things, you clean cut, like all right.
Yeah.
All put together. I never once thought to myself that would be the way you are. And also like the first reaction was, I'm like, is this guy going to be super cocky?
Yeah.
That's my first reaction. However, me thinking that, I get the same feedback. And the truth is, I'm so not that way.
Yeah.
I'm so nice. I love to talk to people. I'm so friendly and kind. And I just want acceptance.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we might put off this air,
Yeah. And people assume it. It's actually interesting. To add on to that is the other thing that I've dealt with is I get to a place of insecurity or, I want people to know that, hey, I'm not a threatening person where I would almost as if try to buy friendships.
Yeah.
And let me take you to dinner or go on a trip and everything and just throwing all these things. And it's just like, wait a second. If they don't like you for who you are and not for what you have, then they're not meant to be in your life.
Yep.
And so that's the other struggle I've had is I'm always willing to give. And I'm the first person who, hey, dinner needs to be covered. I got it here, there. And I had a few buddies pull me aside, and they're like, we just want you as a friend. Mm-hmm. We don't need anything from you. We don't care what you do for work, the amount of money that you make. And so that's also been a shift, understanding that, if I'm somewhere and it's a group of people I may not know, I don't have to be the first person to step up and pay the bill, because I can connect with the people in that room and earn their respect because of the person that I am and what I stand for, and not what I do for them.
Yeah. And you see, I'm sure you're coming to this, but you see that it all translates to how you actually feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And what's so crazy is like, for me, receiving all that feedback and I've struggled really badly with just like making friends in general, because I left my whole entire community behind when I left. I left my childhood friends, everyone, all of it. I left it all behind, and I went into a new world to try and start a new life. And the level of distrust that I had for people because of the religion that I grew up in, it's just overflowed into this place of like, I can't trust anyone. I don't want anyone to help me. And just like you, I am the same way. And like, I'll pay the bill. I'll come pick you up. I'll do this. Yeah. I'll do that. Like just this giving. But I will say the flaw in that is, especially before, it's not so much now, but before, if someone didn't reciprocate, I would be super mad.
I'm right there with you.
Okay.
That's the same thing.
I love it. So that is a covert contract, right? If you've read the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, I did that for the majority of my adult life. I'm constantly giving covert contracts to people where they don't know the agreement that we are in, that they have to reciprocate the same level of respect and effort that I'm putting in. Yeah. And if they don't reciprocate it, I hold it against them.
Yeah.
Which is wild that we do that. Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy?
Well, and one of the things I told my coach a few weeks ago, I said, I am so frustrated because I will invite people to go to dinner or go to a game or a concert or whatever, but I never get invites to anything. And I said to him, why? What is it? Something wrong with me? And one of the things he said to me is, some people are called to be the organizer. And if you do that, guess what? You're never left out. You can control the optics, but also some people, that's just their calling. And he told me that for years he had organized a Lake Powell trip for all of his friends. The past 2 years, he kind of stepped away from it. And as we were talking, he said, I think the week before, his friends had all just gone on a Lake Powell trip and didn't even think to invite him to go along. And so that was another mind shift for me on, it's like, okay, maybe because my job is all about networking and connection and stuff, maybe it's my job to be the organizer and get things set up and everything. And, if people don't want to invite me, that's on them. I have no control over that, but I can create awesome experiences and activities where everyone can enjoy, and I can also have a great time.
Yeah. That's such a it is a complicated subject because I have the same issue, 100%. Like being included, right? Yeah. Like I want to be included, but I'm not included. And then if I try to do something, then people don't want to participate. And it's this like constant battle. And I would say that the biggest shift for me has been this last year when coming to this understanding and realization that everything in this life, everything is based off of how I validate myself.
Yeah.
Everything. There's not a thing that doesn't revolve around that. You could even say to the level, like I think about like my son and I'm like, well, I want him to be successful and happy and all these things. Why? Why do I want that? So that I can tell myself that I'm good.
Yeah.
That is why.
Yeah.
So when we think about it from that perspective and you think like, okay, everything is about validation. If I'm seeking validation outside of myself, I am already losing. Mm-hmm. You are lost. So to your point, if you want to create this like life, right? And you want to have like this social life, like all these things, your coach is 100% right in the sense that you create that.
Yeah.
You can't let someone else create that because then what happens if they don't invite you?
Exactly.
You're not a part of that creation.
Exactly.
And it's out of your hands. And then you're relying on someone else to validate you.
Yeah. And
that's a hard thing. It's a super hard thing to get over. But I think that once you truly start to validate yourself, there's been this shift for me where I've had more people come to me and start including me it's almost like the try hard, right? Like it's like when you're dating and it's like the girl who's just a little too over, a little too available, a little too over it. For some reason, it's just like this turnoff, and it's not because they're not a good person, but it's because they lack that self-confidence within themselves that you also recognize it. And you're like, I don't want to be your confidence.
Yeah. No. And I was dating a girl a little bit ago, and one of the issues I had with her was I loved when we spent time together. But the problem was I was her only social aspect. And I'm like, you need to have friends. We had an experience with the guys. We went to watch the Super Bowl. And I'm like, look, the wives and girlfriends are going to go do their own thing. But she just wanted to be with me and be with the guys. And I'm like, we can spend time together. But there's times where it might just be with the guys. And I need you to have your other friends that you can go and see and hang out with and everything, and not just put it on me. But also, I felt like outside of our relationship, you need other outlets that you can talk to and open up and express things with. It can't just all be dumped on me, because, hey, I may have a day where I'm having an awful day where I can't hold the adequate space for her and honor her and what she's saying and everything. And I'm like, on a day like that, if you have other friends and people you can turn to, then I can have my day. You can still open up and talk with someone. And when I'm ready, I can now jump in and help any way I can. But there was a balancing act of, I was like, it can't just be me 24/7.
Yeah. Do you think, so a little bit about me, I've been married and divorced 4 times.
Okay.
Got married when I was 20, divorced. Got married when I was 25, divorced. Got married when I was 29, divorced. Got married again when I was 36 and divorced. All of those relationships, I was overextending myself on trying to please.
Yeah.
And then having that resentment for them when they didn't reciprocate. I'm in a relationship now, and I didn't meet this girl until after I had come to this understanding and realization, ayahuasca included, that it was everything, all the fulfillment, the value, everything was within me and comes from me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, when I made that shift, like 4 months after doing ayahuasca, I met this girl, and it has been nothing but the most healthy and perfect relationship. And I'm telling you, I could not have that type of person come until I changed. I screwed up 4 times.
Yeah.
And it's just beating your head against the wall. And you're thinking like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Once I changed, everything changed. I finally attracted the type of person because before I was attracting the person that I was like.
Yeah.
And once I changed, I attracted the person that I was like.
And that's the way I think the universe works.
100%.
When you take the time to work on yourself and what you put in the universe gives back. And so that time you took to work on yourself and dig deep, now here came the right person for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so wild, because that is the recipe for everything, all of it. Like when we talk about manifestation is like an overused term right now. It's just, everyone talks about it all the time. I want to manifest.
Yeah.
And I look at it, I like to use the word create instead, because I believe that, and my journey from getting sober and all of these things was, I think for so long I had this lottery mentality. And what I mean by that is like no work. And then just one day I'm going to meet that girl. One day I'm going to make that money. One day I'm going to get all of it. It's that lottery mentality of like, I'm not going to do anything towards anything that I want. I'm just going to believe that I'm going to get it someday, and it'll just happen. Yeah. Right. I'll win the lottery. That is not real. Yeah. That does not happen. So when I shifted my focus and said, I have to create everything that I want, everything, being intentional about it, saying like, what do I need to do today to make that thing come into my life? Starting the podcast, writing the book, joining the men's group. Yeah. Those are all actions that I have to take.
Exactly.
It doesn't just come to you.
Yeah.
But once you do take those actions, it's like pretty incredible that like joining the men's group, now I get to meet someone like you, and I'm already connecting with you on a level where I'm like, dang, this guy is so awesome, and he can understand what I'm going through because we're also going through it.
Yeah.
Right. But if I didn't create this opportunity, it never would have come.
Happened. And I love that word create and the way that you use that, because part of the issue, and I think it's with our society, it's what we see in the media, it's what we see through politics, is so many people think they're entitled to everything in life. And it's like, guys, even if you look at the experiment of America, the American dream was meant to be worked for, not handed to you. And so you create by the work that you put in. If you want a life, I'm going to go create it. I'm going to go get it. If I want to be healthy, I got to start going to the gym. I got to eat right. I can't just say, I want to be healthy tomorrow and have some muscle. Well, no, there's work that goes in each and every day that you have to put in. Now, you may miss a day. You may slip up. But if you're creating and you're putting it into the universe, it answers back.
Yeah. Well, see, one thing that like completely turned my head upside down from this idea of creating is I realized that I've always been creating, always. I created an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I created trouble at my job. I created horrible relationships. I created because everything I'm doing every single day is making that happen.
Yeah.
And so when people say to me like, you know, I want to get in shape, or I want to, you know, someone I know about a year ago or so was complaining about just lots of anxiety and just not feeling good. And they, you know, from over several years and having a couple kids, they put on some weight. And my advice to them was this. I said, if you will just wake up every morning and go for a walk, your entire life will change.
Yeah.
That person lost 87 pounds in a year. And that was the first step of creating.
Yep.
And it's such a perfect formula. It's such an exact formula. And my point is like, this is a great example too. You know, I'd done so much work. I'd written a book. I'd done all these things, and I'm creating kind of, right? But I haven't really pushed my book and I haven't really done a lot of these things, right? I've been focused on my quote unquote 9-to-5 career.
Yeah.
And over this last year, I was like, okay, I have to start putting something towards this. And the thing that I love about this formula is that you have to have, you want to put an eye on what you want in the, you know, way out there. But then if you just do the steps, if you take the steps every single day. So my step in this, and I'm telling you, I'm being very, very vulnerable here. I don't know. I know where I want to get. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I really don't. But one thing I do know is that I can do this. I can have a podcast once a week and I can post clips every day.
Yeah.
And that's my step to creating. Do I know exactly how, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
No, I don't. But I know that I'm putting forth, I am creating it. Right. And that's a scary thing to do. It's super uncomfortable because one, you're investing, it's so out of my realm of control because I don't know the result of what it's going to be. But one thing I do know is that if I wake up and I do it and I stay consistent with it, something will come. It will be revealed in what the next step is. And I'm curious, like, you know, look, you have a decent following on Instagram and like things like that. Like those are things that I aspire to get and have. What is your advice to like to those types of things? It's
I think it goes back to what you're saying is you have to create it and you have to work at it. And it's not going to be an easy process and it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, I was at the point where my old Instagram, I had 2,500 followers. It got hacked and I lost everything. Posts, memories, everything. And I'm like, okay, you got to restart. But then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to create a new Instagram, what is my message going to be? Because I'm always a believer on you can have a huge following, but if you don't have a message, it doesn't matter. And so I started to create content. But what I told myself is I'm going to be authentically myself. Nothing will be off limits. And I'm just going to speak my truth to the world. And in doing that, I started to connect with people and more of it started to follow. And then people started reaching out to me, and I would get stopped at the grocery store, the gym. We saw a video. Hey, I love this, what you did. And then people started to reach out to collab and connect. And that's where I got my idea for the podcast. I was like, I'm meeting these amazing people through work and through social. Why am I not bringing these conversations to the world and letting people come in? It's selfish of me to just hold all of the gold nuggets I was learning in conversations. I'm like, I'm just going to share it with everybody. And in doing so, it's allowed me a space where I can connect with so many people and get my message to people. I may not even meet them, but I know, hey, I post this video today. It may touch 2 people, but 2 people is better than 0. And so my advice to people is just keep going. There's days where you don't want to film, you don't want to do any content, you don't want to post. Just keep going. And some days you're just going through the motions. But in doing so in that regular routine, it becomes part of your lifestyle and not something you have to do. I think also on that is I'm a big believer in the law of polarity, and it's understanding that I'm going to post something and it's going to have negative comments. But those negative comments also means there's going to be positive comments. And it's the same thing. If someone's over there, they're like, I love your video, it's great. Someone else in the universe is saying, I hate your video. And so when you understand that that's the way the law of polarity in the universe works, is every negative has a positive and vice versa. And even if you look at the objects, every rose will have thorns. The sun can give you warmth, but it can also burn you. And so understanding that, I think it helps you get into the game of social media and doing stuff like that, because then you're prepared for the good and the bad.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yesterday on Jimmy's call, he talked about how when he started We Are the They and he did the first leadership group, and he said one guy left after a certain period of time, and he was so like kind of taken back. He's like, why did you leave? He even to the point of like not looking at the 49 that stayed.
Yeah.
He's looking at
focused on the one.
And I'll tell you what, when it comes to social media, for me, if I get one negative comment, I'm just like, what did I do wrong? And you're right. You cannot make everyone happy.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's not real. And that shouldn't be the deterrent, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that, one thing for me, in starting the podcast and like even writing my book, there was a lot of fear of like, what if someone doesn't like it? What if, and what's funny is I even think about like my personal quote unquote following or friends on Instagram. And I think like, man, if I post this video, they're going to think it's stupid.
Yeah.
And I shifted my mind and I said, someone is not going to think it's stupid.
Yeah.
Someone is going to find value in this. And I can't not do it because I think that someone is going to be annoyed by it or, whatever. That's their thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to put it out there regardless.
Well, and the beautiful thing is when you create a circle and friends around you that you trust, when they start seeing you on social, they start giving you ideas. I had a buddy of mine reach out and said, hey, here's a topic or maybe a video you should post to hit on everything. I did a video an hour later on the thing recommends he sent me. That video has 2 million views.
Wow.
And it's because I have these people in my life who are willing to step up and be like, hey, try this. They knew I wasn't afraid to film or to do anything. And so when you create that group, it enables you. And then you're not the one doing all the thinking. I have buddies all the time. Check out this video or check out this idea. Or, hey, let's talk about this topic and everything. And it makes your job so much easier. But it's also fun because now your friends are participating with you.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, you're shifting from, worried about annoying someone to getting to a group of people that's encouraging you to do these things, right? And the funny thing is, I think that especially when it comes to social media and maybe your closer like family groups and stuff like that, I think when you start doing it and you start posting a lot and stuff like that, I believe that those people are annoyed or upset because they are not doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, come back down. This is something I found really quickly when I quit drinking. When you quit drinking, that group that you're in, they're gonna fake encourage you, but they're gonna try and pull you back.
Yeah.
And they're gonna pull you back because you quitting forces them to look at themselves.
Exactly.
And it's so wild how the human mind works, because a lot of people are doing this, they're not intentionally even doing it, but they are constantly doing this comparison. They're like, this guy is leaving our group and he's going up.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to go up, and I don't want to look at myself, come back, fail, so that I can feel okay.
Yeah. Well, and if I can add to that, and you'll start to see this joining the coaching group, is I've realized the more I've leveled up, my friend group has shifted. There's friends here who are great people, but they're not working on themselves and progressing. And so I see myself leaving them behind because my goals, my intentions, my beliefs are now different from them. And there's a space and a time where we can still connect, but I'm starting to surround myself with people who force me to better myself every day and to step into integrity as a man. And so it's an interesting journey that you go on. As the more you work on yourself, the more friends that come into your life, but also rather than just addition, you realize there needs to be some subtraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because you have to be willing to let that stuff go.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to let people go. And it's not a matter of out of anger or hate or, anything like that. It's really about out of, looking at yourself and saying, what do I want my life to be? How do I want to create? What do I want to have? And I think a funny one is always like, hey, if I won the lottery, well, I'd have to get new friends because these guys have to go to work, right?
Yeah.
And so I got to have rich friends, right? Or I got to have this type of friend. If I want to be a golfer, I need to find golfing friends, right? Like, you got to find these people. And I think the purpose of We Are the They, and I think the reason that it's grown in popularity is, where do you go and find people, men who want to be vulnerable, talk about their feelings, and like really get to the raw source? And then how do I take that and grow?
Yeah.
That is really hard to find.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is, when you do connect on a level, I met a kid in my coaching group. He's 19, and he was doing door-to-door sales out in Pennsylvania. And they were talking on a Monday, and he's like, hey, I think I'm done for the summer. I'm going to drive home. It's a 19-hour drive across 6 states. And so that night, I booked a flight, jumped in a car, picked me up at the airport. We drove across 6 states, 19 hours. I had only known him maybe a week, stayed with his family, met his friends, everything. But it was because we opened up, we connected, but also when you are vulnerable, you want to show up for your brothers. You want to show up for your friends. And so for me, that was an opportunity to show up and also to spend some more time together. And it's such a crazy thing, because in full circle, he wants to play soccer and come to Utah. Well, I happened to, when I did my personal training business, I trained some of the players that are on the soccer team. So 2 weeks ago, he was able to come here. One of my former clients was able to take him to a tour. He went to a soccer game and everything. But it's when you're willing to show up and take that chance. Now, the thing that was interesting is the trip, it wasn't perfect. There was a lot of positives. There was also a lot of negatives. As a black person going through the Midwest and a small town in Missouri, there were certain things that came with that and certain levels to which I was uncomfortable. But I knew you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because when you're in an environment like that, it teaches you so much about yourself. And in the process of working with yourself, now you know how to cope with those situations. A year or two ago, if I had tried to do that, I would have been angry, caused a fight or everything. But you learn to communicate and talk about, hey, I'm in this situation and this is how it makes me feel. And you're not ashamed to talk about it or bring it up. And one of the nights after we had an awkward day, we sat in the room, and I remember it's about 30 minutes. We didn't say a word, and we sat there, and finally we opened up, and we probably spent 4 hours just talking, just pouring out, well, this is how this makes me feel, this is how I feel, everything, and understanding how we function within situations. Because now in the future, we don't put each other in those situations. We put ourselves in a spot where we can excel and succeed.
Interesting. That's such a great, I love that, you're at a place, it sounds like, where you're hyper aware in what's happening. And, while things don't go your way, they don't, but you're, instead of, again, taking that old path, right, of just going to anger, you're analyzing the situation. And really, it sounds like you're going inside and saying, like, why do I feel this way? How do I feel? Right. And saying, like, let me audit myself in trying to understand myself better.
Yeah.
and learn from every scenario, right?
Exactly.
I think that one thing that I accepted several years back was, and this is a radical thing to say, but there is no such thing as bad.
Yeah.
It does not exist. Everything is for us.
Exactly.
All of it. And that's hard to hear those words when you're going through something quote unquote hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. It's 100% true.
Yeah.
And if we look at that, and when everything that comes our way, if we accept it as, this is for me, this is for me.
Yeah.
We move out of that place of like trying to be happy or sad, and we move into that line of acceptance. Mm-hmm. And you just stay on this. I do a lot of meditation. I love listening to like ayahuasca music and stuff, but it's like that hum or that om, like that is life.
Yeah.
Instead of the up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, you just accept and you stay in the middle at all times.
Yeah.
And that's that calm, beautiful place.
No, it is. And I think one of the ways to get to that place, and it's a concept I've been working on lately, is so many times we want to self-sacrifice for those around us. But there's a time and a place where you need to be selfish.
Oh,
I remember, going back to my basketball group, I used to let anyone just come and play. And I'm like, this kid annoys me. I don't even like this kid. And they have the point where I'm like, okay, if I'm organizing, if I'm setting it up, I'm going to be selfish. And I want to play with those that I consider friends and be able to say no. Hey, I don't like you. This is not a good environment for you and everything. Whereas before, I wanted everyone to be happy and have fun and everything. And I'm like, wait a second, if I'm controlling the situation, why am I putting people that trigger me into that environment? And now I start my day or end my day in a terrible mood. And so it was a balancing of, okay, it is good to self-sacrifice, but also there's a time and a place to be a little selfish.
Yeah.
To protect your energy, to protect your time and your well-being.
Yeah. Man, this has been dope. I think I'll have to have you on again. I'm excited, to get to know you better and be a part of the group, man. Appreciate you coming on, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.